According to the United States Census Bureau, Germans represented the largest ethnic group in the United States in 2019. A remarkable 43 million Americans identified as having full or partial German ancestry, when Pennsylvania alone accounting for 3.5 million. It's evident that at some point in history, a substantial number of German immigrants made the journey across the Atlantic to reach America. Of the 17th century, when William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, invited religious outcasts from Germany to settle in his colony. Facing severe religious persecution at home, many eagerly accepted his offer. Over the following decades, German immigration to Pennsylvania steadily increased. Most of these settlers came from southwestern regions of Germany, such as Baden-Württemberg, the Palatinate, and Rhineland. However, they were not the only Germans drawn to Pennsylvania. By the mid-1700s, these immigrants had established several towns like Germantown, Skipak, and Conestoga, with an estimated 6,500. The first major wave of German settlers arrived in the American colonies. Near the end, 0 Germans having settled in the welcoming colony. By the 1770s, as the colonies inched closer to Revolutionary War, the influx of German immigrants slowed considerably. Many of the tens of thousands who had left Germany were not only seeking religious freedom, but also fleeing the devastation of the 30 Years' War and other subsequent conflicts that had ravaged their homeland. The outbreak of another large-scale war in the New World shattered the dreams of many for a safe and promising new beginning. For those who had already settled in colonies, life was challenging but far from unbearable. The prospect of achieving success in the New World appeared genuinely attainable for these hardworking immigrants. According to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, a typical German immigrant around 1750 was a poor farmer or artisan who arrived with a spouse and 2 children. They likely incurred debt to cover their passage across the Atlantic, but often had family or friends already established in America. While they were affiliated with the Lutheran or Reformed Church, their commitment to organized religion was genuinely minimal. Historical records show that many of these individuals became prosperous and integral members of their communities. However, a significant number were too impoverished to afford the transatlantic journey, leading as many as half to 2/3 of German immigrants to come to Pennsylvania as indentured servants or redemptioners, as they were known among Germans. These redemptioners entered into contracts, typically ranging from 2 to 7 years, obligating them to work for specific employers to repay the debts incurred from their voyage to America. By the time the surge of German immigration had subsided, there were, according to some historians, nearly 7,500 Germans residing in Pennsylvania, with many others having settled throughout the other colonies or planning to arrive in the future. Since the foundation of Jamestown, there had been nearly continuous stream of Germans venturing into the New World. Even some German Hessian soldiers employed by the British during the American Revolution chose to remain in the United States after the war ended. In the early 1800s, more Germans began to make their way to America, although not in as large numbers as before, largely due to the famine in their homeland. Others followed a few decades later, driven by the political unrest in Germany. During the 1850s, approximately 1 million Germans arrived in the United States, increasing the total number of German-born Americans to around 1.3 million by the 1860s. In the 1870s, over 100,000 Germans from Russia migrated to America after the Tsarist government revoked privileges that had been granted to German farmers in Russia centuries earlier. The 1880s saw the largest wave of German immigration, with about 1.5 million Germans arriving in the US during that decade alone. This period marked the peak of German immigration, as the number of German-born Americans dropped from 2.9 million to to 2.3 million between 1890s and 1910s, indicating a significant decline in immigration. By the 1920s, the number had declined even further to 1.7 million. Despite the displacement caused by World War II, the number of Americans born in Germany was only 1.2 million at the start of the conflict. Germans continued to immigrate in the following decades, as they still do today, but the numbers have significantly decreased. By 1990s, only 5.8 million Americans identified as being of full or partial German descent, though many more could trace their ancestry back to German ancestors. Despite the decline in immigration, Germans have had a profound impact on the United States. The German heritage remains one of the most prominent in the country. The reasons for their immigration were numerous. One often overlooked factor, though not applicable to the earliest wave of immigrants, was the story shared by the Germans, who had already successfully established new lives in America. From Gottfried Duden, influential book to simple letters exchanged between German immigrants and their acquaintances back home, people in Germany began hearing about the opportunities and freedoms that the American colonies and later the United States offered. Word of mouth alone often spurred further migration, but many other factors contributed to the Germans making the journey across the ocean. For many, the feudal system in their homeland left them yearning for greater independence, as did other restrictions, such as limits on marriage due to fears of overpopulation and worsening economy. The economic situation was already dire for many, with high taxes being a constant burden, making a respectable living seemed more attainable in the new world, especially with news of land being granted to new settlers and industrialization later opening up more jobs opportunities beyond the traditional farming. Additionally, some communities in the German states were eager to rid themselves of the lower class and even covered the cost of journey to America if the immigrants promised never to return. Some German men fled illegally to escape compulsory military service, while others sought refuge from famine and frequent wars. Religious freedom was also a major driving force, as evident by many of the early immigrants to the New World. At that time, people were often compelled to adhere to a specific religious doctrines, whether Catholicism or Protestantism, by the ruling monarchs. Those with strong alternative beliefs who refused to conform often saw fleeing their homeland as the only way to practice their faith freely. The American colonies not only offer religious freedom, but as mentioned earlier, the founder of Pennsylvania even extended invitations to those religious outcasts to settle in his colony. Of course, many factors influenced why people from any country decided to immigrate, as this was far from an exclusive list. However, these are some of the primary reasons that have been identified. Without German immigrants, for example, Americans might not have the tradition of decorating Christmas trees, and the Brooklyn Bridge might never have been constructed without the exercise of a German immigrant engineer. Business owners, military leaders, scientists, countless German immigrants across the Atlantic, and played a crucial role in shaping the future of the colonies and the United States. Even today, Germans continue to immigrate to the US occasionally, but the lasting impact of those who arrived earlier is even more significant. It is believed that in 6 states, over 30% of the population consists of full or partial German Americans. Another 7 states have at least a 20% ethnic German population, and across all 50 states, none have a German population comprising less than 4.5% of the state's total population. One of the most remarkable aspects of this is that most immigrants from the German states have fully or nearly fully assimilated into German American culture and identity, meaning there has not been a widespread, deliberate effort to preserve German identity in America. While some German heritage societies and communities do exist, It is largely due to millions of people who braved the journey to start a new life in the United States that so much of America's roots are German.